All right, my name is Dan, and I finished reading Malazan Book of the Fallen 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And so I'm still the expert, and I thought, why don't I do a whiteboard summary video for people either making their way through for the first time or for people who just want to know what Malazan is about. And we'll go in order. We'll go through all the books. It all will fit onto this board so you can understand what is happening. So it starts out with this woman named the candle lady. I mean, that's not really where it starts. It starts out with a little boy named Perrin. And Perrin wants to be a bridge burner so bad. And so he talks to a guy named Fiddler and Whiskey Jack. And Whiskey Jack's in charge of the bridge burners, okay? And there's a woman named Lacine, and she becomes the empress because at the start of the book, I don't know why I started with the candle lady. That makes no sense. At the start of the whole series, there's a coup going on, and Kellenved is the old emperor, and he has a buddy named Cotillion. Or whatever. Okay, so they're best buddies, and Lacine has done this whole coup thing, but really, Kellenved and Cotillion are not totally gone. We just don't know that they're still around until later in this book, or until it gets more explicitly stated in the second book, and if you still haven't gotten it, in the third book. So that's happening. Perrin's like, I wish I could be a bridge burner. And Fiddler's like, dude, you don't need to worry about doing that sort of thing. Or whatever. That might be like at the end of the whole thing. Anyway, Perrin grows up. And before that happens, this candle lady who's like a witch, she meets a girl named Absolar. And as they're walking around, there's first we have these two cloaked people, and as a hint, they're already on here. Those are Kellenved and Cotillion, and Kellenved is actually now named Shadowthrone, and Cotillion is now named Cotillion. Whatever. He has a lot of names. One of his other names is the Rope. And one of them is Dancer, I think. Unless I'm getting that wrong. They also had Kellenved had a first sword named Dasim Ultor, maybe? That might be it. I don't know. It's been a while, but, you know. Or his name is Traveler, too. And this is, this is for the whole flippin' thing. This is big spoilers for the whole series. Anyway, this guy's gone. This guy's gone. This guy's gone. The senior's gone. A bunch of people are gone. And this candle lady, she gives some guff to these soldiers that are going past, and they she gets backhanded, and she falls on Absolar, and she's like, now we're the same person, prod and pull, whatever the heck. And Cotillion's like, yoink, I'm gonna take Absolar to be like a super assassin now. And so now Absolar is called Sorry. Now, going back to Perrin, he grows up and he flies out to a new place, and he is told by Lorne, who is the what's the kind of like the first assistant or whatever to the Empress Lysine. And Lorne is putting Perrin in charge as like a captain of the bridge burners now, which I don't really exactly understand because it's been a while. Why Whiskey Jack is not whatever. So Sari's like 13 years old, and she's like, she goes to Whiskey Jack and she's like, I could be a bridge burner. I'm like 12, but I have these knives and I'm good at this. And he's like, sure. And so Perrin is a part of the bridge burners, and they go into Darujistan, or they go to Genebacus there. That's a continent, and there's this big fight going on. And it's between Anomander Rake, AR, on a big a big floating city in the sky called Moonspawn. He's standing on top of it. And he's fighting against the bridge burners. He's fighting against a lady named Tattersail, Hairlock, who gets blasted by someone on his side and turned into a puppet. And he goes into the Chaos Realm, and he goes crazy. And eventually Tattersail turns into a little girl because she gets blown up hugging a giant. And so she gets turned into a little girl who's also got Tattersail in her and an old lady in her. And maybe another person in her. In this little girl. Okay? So they're all fighting. Perrin goes in and initially we're like, Anomander Rake's the bad guy of this series. Or it's Empress Lysine or whatever. And Anomander Rake he's a Tist-Andi. Now, the Tist-Andi, they have really dark skin. And they all come from Mother Dark. Hundreds of thousands of years ago. So there's the Tist-Andi, they're the Tist Leosin, which have light skin, which is from Daddy Light or whatever. And there's the Tist Edur with gray skin. And the Tist-Andi and the Tist Leosin don't like each other, but they really don't like the Tist Edur, who live on a different continent and live in shadow realms and stuff. And there's a shadow realm on Raraku, where the bridge burners became kind of bridge burners because they had this traumatic experience. And now a bunch of them have died in a tunnel, by the way. And there's a floating island that Anomander Rake's brother defends it. And they, I'm trying to think of where the other shadow places are. Anyway, they're the Tist Edur. And so Anomander Rake is there, and they can turn into dragons. And because they got a little dragon in them, they go a little crazy sometimes. And there's a super dragon lady called Kilmandaros, which I don't exactly remember what she's all about, but she's there. But not in the first book. Anyway, they're fighting with the bridge burners. And there's a bunch of assassins in this city called Darujistan. One assassin, one guy named Crocus. He kind of wants to be an assassin, but he's a thief. Crocus. He goes around on the tops of buildings and steals stuff. And he goes into this one girl's house whose name is... what was her name? Dang it. Goes into her house, steals a bunch of stuff, and is like, dang, she's looking fine. Leaves, feels bad, goes back, puts it all back, and she's like, what the heck? And then he becomes more of an assassin guy, and in the end of the book, he throws some rocks at the main assassin lady. And that's the end of book 1. But before the end of book 1, there is a barrow with there's a bunch of different races. They're the Tist Andi, they're the Tist Edur, the Tist Leosin. They're also they got fangs. They start with a G. And they used to something tyrant. Flip. Anyway, they were tyrants ages ago. And there are the Talan Imas, which are undead people that lived a long time ago that would find these guys, and they turn to dust and they float around, and now they listen to Tattersail, who's now is named Silver Fox. Okay? You with me so far? All right. And so there's this party at the end of book 1, and they go in, and there's a duel, and Celeste d'Arle or something is who Crocus is into. Okay, but now he's into Sari. He's got a crush on the dagger girl. There's at this duel, one of them is like, "Hey, I won," and to this other lady, he's like, "Here's a knife. Go kill yourself." And then Quick Ben goes with the Quick Ben is cool, and Callum is his buddy. And we have people like, these are all bridge burners, by the way. We have Hedge and Mallet and Picker, and we have a Barghast, which is another big. He's like a big. He comes from a big race. He's a Barghast, okay, and he's related to the Teblor. And we have a big Teblor guy named Karsa. And at some point in the series, he pulls someone's balls off because he was like a priest messing with a girl. That'll come later. Okay? And so they're kind of all related here. And then that's the end of the first book. And some of them, Absolar, Crocus, Callum, Fiddler, they all go to a different place to drop off Absolar to be back with her family, on her planet or on her continent at the start of the book. Kellenved and Cotillion released a bunch of dogs named the Hounds of Shadow, and they went and killed a bunch of dudes. And Perrin killed one of those hounds. Oh, no. Or it was Animander Rake. But either way, Perrin got stuck in Animander Rake's sword for a little while and got out. And everyone's like, shh, shh. And that's the end of the first book. So we get to the second book. We move to a new continent named Seven Cities. There is Perrin's sister named Felicin. Little sister, and she is a little bit, she's cool, but she's getting sent to this mine where she's going to be like big time bullied and taken advantage of, and the worst things ever. But also, Perrin has another sister named Tavor, who now that Lorne has died in the first book, now Tavor is the right hand lady, and she's got a sword that makes magic go away. And so at the start of the book, we have Felicin going to a mine with Haboric, who has no hands. Haboric, I'll just write Haboric, and then I'll do a little brackets, no hands, so you remember. He's going there. Bowden's going there. And he's supposed to take care of Felicin, make sure too much harm comes over her or whatever. We have now Lysine has a special group of people or of assassins named the Claws. And Tavor is we have people called the Talons. And they kind of go at each other. And so Tavor might be a Talon, but we don't know until maybe like book 10 or something like that. Okay? Let me get a new, let's see if red works. So they are going to a jail where a bunch of people, there's a bunch of jade statues, but not, there's a jade statue in a desert, and they touch it and they go crazy. They have like this trip out and it's wild. Now, also in book 2, there is a guy named not Cotillion, or am I thinking shoot. What the heck is the other Uh-oh. Anyway, he's the leader of the chain of dogs. Okay? I'm just doing Cotillion 2.0. Because I don't remember his name. Okay? And they need to get across the continent, because even though they're part of the Malazans, this Lysine's she's the empress of the Malazan Empire, they're not doing so well on this other continent called Seven Cities. And so now they're going over, and there's a guy named Mappo, who we like, who has the fangs. He's like a part of this race group or whatever. And Icarium, who doesn't remember who he is, and he's been walking for a long time. And he's like a big bomb. Okay? Just to anchor yourself in what's happening in the series so far. And so they're walking, and he's trying to remember himself, but Mappo's like, Icarium could literally blow up at any minute. And so Cotillion's going with these really annoying nobles and some good people, but they keep getting fought, and Callum's going around, and there's this guy named Laoman and a guy named Teblor the Treblor. And Teblor the Treblor ends up being, in a twist, Karsa. But we don't know that until book 4. And so they're going, and they almost make it to this city, and Cotillion 2.0, which I can't remember his name, he's getting all beat up and eaten. He's getting eaten by all these crows. Holy smokes. And this guy named Squint is like, I know what to do. I'm going to shoot him with an arrow. Shoots him with an arrow, and a historian goes past named Duker, and is like, dang. The end of book 2. Okay? And he's like, holy crap. And Callum's like, holy crap. And everyone's like, holy crap. And it makes you cry. So in book 3, you go back to Genebacchus. And so we have Whiskey Jack there and the bridge burners. We have Dujek One Arm, D1A, who's like a leader in the Malazan Empire, and he's there. And now what's happening is there are cannibals in the south that have to be dealt with. But before that, we have one of these, the race with the 2 teeth. They're getting chased by some Talani mass wizards who can sense them, bone casters. And he's like, I know what to do. I'm going to stick my children who are getting chased into a big, like, big cut in the sky. And they're like, there you go. And the one kid ends up being like so evil. And there's a guy who was the big king whose name was King guy I'll just do KK because he's a king that starts with the K. And he made a throne out of bones out of everyone. And they had to make a special warren, like, to shoe all the bones in because he made such a mess of the place. And Animander Rake's older brother made that sword that now Animander Rake's older brother is in. And inside the sword, there's like a moving carriage that's running away from a storm. And if the storm ever catches the carriage, bad stuff's going to happen in there. Until later, Animander Rake's probably going to have to do something about that. And so anytime he kills people, including witches, everyone's like, oh, I feel bad for the witches. That he has to do that by himself because he feels bad. But Atist-Andi, he has a girlfriend who's Atist-Andi, and they only choose like one person. And she's like, I like this guy. I like Whiskey Jack, not Animander Rake. Now I'm getting... She likes Whiskey Jack, and Whiskey Jack is going to eventually die by this king person. And this king person is cursed to never have success ever again, and he'll live forever. And he's had lots of different families and things, and even when he walks around, there's like just destruction behind him. And so they're fighting. They have to fight the cannibals. And there's someone named Talk, and there's someone named Tool, and they have two Segula, and a lady named Lady Envy, who used to be Animander Rake's girlfriend. And they have two hounds that grow really big. One of them grows big, and they go into one of those cannibal temples and mess it up. And then Talk gets captured by a Kachane Chamal lady that hugs him and heals him and hugs him and breaks him and hugs him again for a long time. And then there's this one cannibal leader who's like, I will be kind of nice to you. And then later on, I will be in another book. Okay? And so all this is happening. There's a place called Capistan over here. And everything's going to go there. And there's Beauchelain and Corbel Broach, which are two like necromancer guys who are just studying and things. They're not really integral to the plot, but they have a little duel with Quickben in Capistan while all this is happening, while a guy named Gruntle gets turned into a tiger guy who has swords stuck to him. No, actually, that's the Knight of Death. Bowden gets turned into a Knight of Death. And Gruntle's old friend eats a clay thing, turned into a bird, and flies around up top. And in Capistan, there are the bones of the Barghasts, and the Barghasts just want to get to the bones. And Silver Fox is now, she's the leader of the Talani Mass. And inside they're fighting. All the Panions come in, and the bridge burners are throwing cussers, which are like awesome grenades, and they're just filling the houses and buildings just with dead, it's just like World War Z. Okay? And they're fighting, and the first sword in Capistan's like, I have to go fight. And he goes and does work, and he dies, and they have a first mortal shield or whatever, and his name is Ikovian, and Ikovian loves everyone, and he wants to hug them, and he wants to take their pain away, even if they can't do it for themselves. He eventually dies, and then at the end, they have a big burial, and they give them his gems, like they leave something, and they love him. The end. And they kill that little boy that was stuck in the little boy with the fangs that was stuck in the rend and was doing a bunch of ice magic and thing. The end. House of Chains, we go to Karsa, and he is following the will of his gods, which are actually some Talani mass, and he's like, I gotta go kill some children. But that just means he lives a long time, and children to him are like any humans, okay, because they don't live a long time. He's got a sword made out of Odotarl or whatever, or no, something wood, which is kind of like Odotarl, and he can walk through like magic and stuff, and he kills a hound of shadow. He kills a couple of them and like keeps their heads. He has a wicked he has a sword that is made out of his buddy, and for a while one of his other buddies gets turned into a dog because they run into a forkroll assail. And she's been stuck under a rock for thousands of years because the Talani mass put her there. And she's really long, and she gets out and smacks him on the head, and he turns into a dog. And and Karsa becomes best friends with a guy named cousin Torvald Nom, which was a cousin of an assassin who's been sleeping in a warren for tons of years. And also now Perrin. I haven't mentioned the deck of dragons, but there are these gods, and you can kind of ascend to become one, and you can sit on like a seat and be in charge of like that deck or that realm. But he's in charge of he's like the dealer. He's like the dealer. And so he's kind of like a main character, but like everyone's like a main character in this stinking series. So, Karsa leaves, and Teblor the Treblor is Karsa, and he ends up in Seven Cities. He rips off that guy's junk, and there's a fight between Felicin and Tavor. Tavor wins. The end. And they all find some bones. And they have little necklaces made out of bones. Bone fingers. Okay? And that's foreshadowing. Book 5, we go to a totally different place. Named... There's the Edur down here. And there are the Letheri, or the Lethery. Okay? Edur, Leth. And we have a couple Lethery guys we like. We like Tihor and Bug. And Bug is actually the god of water and beats the crap out of the crippled god temporarily. And Tihor is so smart, and he's in this kingdom it's like super capitalistic, and he's so good at all that. And the Tist Edur, it's a little bit different. They have there's a guy named Troll, and he has a little brother named Rulad. And they have some other brothers, and they are sent to go get a sword from a warren of ice that was put there. And they're not supposed to touch the sword, but because Rulad does, now he like goes crazy. He dies. They put a bunch of coins on him, and every time he dies, he gets a little bit stronger, and so he wants to just fight people all the time. And so by then we're like, who's he gonna fight? He's probably gonna fight Ikariam because he's like a big bomb, and he's probably gonna fight Karsa because he's like a big bomb. Okay? And so we get to the end of that book where they let out another guy named, not Scabandari, but Silchius Ruin. They let him out, and they let out some, I haven't done the reread on these, so this is where it gets really fuzzy. They let him out. There's some fighting going on. There's a guy named Kaz Devor, or no, Iron Bars or something, and he's like, he just kills Rulad willy-nilly for fun on his way past. The end. The next book is called The Bone Hunters. Remember those guys with the finger pendants? Those end up being the Bone Hunters. They're going around. There's Iskarl Pust, who's one of my favorite characters. He works for Kellenved. He works for Shadow Throne. And he's awesome. And there are these guys there's this guy who can turn into there's like a race. A race between people who can turn into a bunch of different creatures. And they're racing to get to this spot. And there's this siege that happens. That's 140 pages. Where there's fire that goes everywhere. Leoman does that. And they get stuck underground. And it's traumatic. It's like this Lewis and Clark cavern sort of experience with the lights off for days. And that would be horrifying. And then there's this fight at the end with Callum and Lysine. They're talking. And then Fiddler does a song, an ode to the bridge burners. The end. And some moon spawns are going around. The end. The next book is called Reaper's Gale. And it goes back to where we did Midnight Tides with the Edur and the Leosin. And they're digging some stuff that turns out to be stuff that Ikariam put there. And there's a guy named Red Mask who's kind of not even him. And Tool shows up. And a guy named Beak shows up. And we cry. And Tull dies. The end. And the next book, Toll the Hounds, is my favorite of the series. And it goes back to Darujistan. And now everyone's sulky. Stani has a daughter because of what happened in Kapistan. She got taken advantage of one of these Panian guys. His name's Harlow. Duaker's hitting on a girl. A big giant kind of guy named Crumble or something is there. Anamanda Rake has a plan. There are people stuck in the carriage inside of his sword. Dasim Ultor shows up and Anamanda, and there's tons of stuff happening. Some guy is being noisy upstairs, and they are tapping on the roof, and the roof caves in, and the cane goes up his butt. And a dog with only 2 legs in the back sees a hound of shadow show up, and he gets up on his 2 legs and gets out of there. And Anamanda Rake chops, and then the sword goes into his head, and now he is in his own sword, and then he does this thing, and it saves everyone in the sword or whatever, and it's awesome. And the Hood, the god of death, is like, sweet, man. The end of Toll the Hounds. Now we have 2 more books. Dust of Dreams. We have a guy named Yadan Derrig who goes to the shore and fights a bunch of people. And people go walking for 1,000 pages. The end. The Crippled God. His chunks are falling out of the sky. I don't think they eat them, but they hug him. It's all good. Callum has a moment with his girlfriend. Absalar and Crocus are hanging out. Perrin does it for a younger kid. He wanted to be a bridge burner, and now another kid wants to do that, and he does kind of what Fiddler did for him. The end. And that is Malazan, Book of the Fallen, in 36 minutes. So, hopefully that helped out. Okay? Talk to you later.